Welcome to the most recent HBP Systems Exchequer version changes video. Currently, the most recent version is 2018R1, and that was launched in May 2018. Now, as not everybody will be upgrading from exactly the same version, today I'll go through the changes from the last two versions of Exchequer. I'll start with 2018R1, and the first couple of things that you're going to notice about that is that the colours look different, and actually when we go to log on, that the login box looks slightly different as well. Now, I'll go over this login box in more detail shortly because it's all to do with how the password complexity has changed to do with GDPR. So when we actually log in, the first thing you'll see is a new skin and a new colour, basically bringing the software up to date with the latest branding for Advanced. Some of the icons you'll see have actually changed, but the important thing here to note is that everything actually resides in the same place. One of the first things that I'm going to mention to you is how you can access the help files and the version release history. If there's anything that you need to know in more detail following today's video, or anything that you need to look back on, the help files in Exchequer are really useful. So using this help option on the very top toolbar, if you go to help contents, it will launch the help screen for you, and this is where you can access help and version release history. So the first thing is underneath installation, troubleshooting and version information and release history, you actually have a breakdown of all of the version changes in each of the versions, starting with the most recent version at the top. If you highlight that over on the left, there's a wealth of information over on the right hand side just going through exactly what has changed in these versions. So that's really useful if there's anything that you need to refer back to. You've also got the same indexing and searching as well, so if there's anything at all that you need to know about within the system, just start typing and it will take you to the relevant help topic. Okay, so moving on from that, in terms of accessing information, there is actually a portal on the very top toolbar here. Now, I just really want to sort of make a quick note that this isn't HBP's support portal. This is actually a live link to Exchequer's portal. Now, you can go through and create a portal logon for them, but I'd really recommend using the HBP portal instead, because your support is with HBP systems, and that's where you can log and track your support tickets. You can view FAQs, videos, and download software updates as well. So in order to get access to the HBP portal, if you don't already, if you just ask a member of the support team when you call in and speak to us, we'll be able to set that up within a matter of minutes for you. So I'm actually going to move on to reports. Now, within this latest version, there are actually a new set of visual report writer template reports. They're included there for you to either use or copy and amend and do whatever you need to with those reports. So they are spread out between a number of different folders, but to sort of go through and point to where some of these are, within account-based and customer-based and customer lists, there is an inactive customer report here. You've also got some new document reports, so quite a few actual transaction export reports with line information on there, all sort of filtered by different things and ran by date and period and so on. There's a whole new data folder, Exchequer data exports. So this is really useful where before you might have done an OLE function to dump out certain information, or a basic visual report writer report. These are all kind of here as standard for you now. So just exports of cost centers and departments, GL codes, stock. So a number of different things within there. There are also some new job costing reports. So some of these are quite new, some WIP reports, some application and valuation reports. Some of these nominal analysis reports are new, so some more sort of tightened up filters around the general ledger history report. And you've also got some new sales and purchase reports as well, all around uplifts and a number of different things. Some sales reports within here as well. So you can see that there are a wealth of different reports for you to go on and have a look at and to play with there. Just one thing to note, when you actually upgrade to this latest version, the system won't include these new reports automatically for you. And the reason for that is in case you happen to have any visual report writer reports with the same code. And of course, importing these reports automatically would subsequently override those reports. And obviously, we don't want that to happen. So if you are upgrading, within your reports folder for the specific Exchequer company, there will be a new folder called Example Visual Report Writer Reports, and you can import the reports from there just simply by going to File and Import Visual Report Writer Report. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to talk about is quite a big topic, which I'm sure you've all heard about. It's all about the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, and the changes that are coming into play this May. I'm sure we've all heard about it by now, so I'm not going to bore you with any of the details about what that is, but if you do happen to need any information on GDPR, then HBP do offer a wealth of information, so please do get in touch. So one of the things that's included as standard with Exchequer with GDPR is they have changed the password complexities, which I will go through with you very shortly. So it's all to do with your password settings, which used to be accessed from your system setup and passwords, and it has now been renamed to user management and looks slightly different. So we'll go through that in a moment. There are a couple of other things that Exchequer are offering in terms of GDPR. So there's a module which allows you to anonymize your data. Essentially, you will mark which fields within your system hold personal identifiable information, and then you can set the system up to anonymize that information after a set period of retention. There is also another module that Exchequer are offering to do with your pervasive database. So if you are running on a pervasive version of Exchequer, there is a module which will allow you to encrypt those pervasive files in order to add another level of security to your data. Obviously, if you need any information with regards to those modules, please do get in touch with us on the support desk, but your account managers will be contacting you as well. So going back to this password security, so essentially what now happens within Exchequer is that there are two ways to set your passwords when you first log into the system. Is now accessed from this user management interface. Now, selecting configuration over on the bottom right will open up the new user authentication settings screen. So on a company by company basis, you can either set Exchequer authentication or Windows authentication for your passwords. Now, setting Exchequer authentication will allow you to set the rules on how complex users' passwords should be. So, for example, the password must contain an uppercase letter, a lowercase, a number, and possibly a special character as well. And then you can set the minimum length that you might want that password to be when users log on. If you were to set this to Windows authentication, which I'm not going to do in this instance, just because of how my system is actually set up, but what this allows you to do is actually link your Exchequer logon with your Windows user accounts. If you set this option, all users within this company will have to be set to Windows authentication. And you will go and link your Exchequer username to your Windows username, which I'll show you in a moment. There is also an option on this screen to suspend a user after so many failed login attempts, which is quite useful in terms of making that logon that extra layer of security. Okay, so other changes within here then, when you actually come to add a new user, it does look slightly different, although you do still have the same access settings screen that you used to, the same signatures screen, and all of the normal defaults that you would have against a user within there. There are some new fields that you will see when initially setting up the user. The first one being the status, active or suspended. So obviously that links to the tick switch we've just seen on the other screen, whereby an account would be suspended after so many failed logins. But as an administrator of the system, you can come in here and suspend an account if you need to. And just a little note that could be quite useful if you were doing some maintenance and you had everybody logged out of the system, for example, and you didn't want people to be logging in. You could come in here and actually manually suspend all of the accounts. The other options that you have within here are Windows User ID. So again, going back to our configuration screen, if we had set that we wanted the company to have Windows logons, this is where you would put your domain name /user ID, and the system would do the rest in terms of talking to your Active Directory to link that to your Windows username. There are some settings here to do with how you want to generate the password on a new user. So either manually enter the password, which is what we're used to, or randomly generate an email to user. Now you can see that's grayed out at the moment, but the only reason is because there isn't an email address in here. As soon as there's one there, you can tick the box to randomly generate a password, and that will be emailed to the user. What there also is, it's not available on this screen just because this isn't the user I'm logged in as at the moment, but for your own user, you do have a security question and answer. And what this is used for is when we first logged into the system, there was a little underlined forgotten password link, which you might be used to seeing for when you log into your emails online or Facebook online or in any kind of online programs. So it works in the same way, in that the user will be able to click on that hyperlink and it will ask them a security question which they need to answer before they are emailed a new password. Also new on this screen is this little GDPR highlight PII fields tick switch. Now this is all to do with the anonymization module. So if you have purchased the anonymization module, then this will allow that particular user to see a colour marking which fields are highlighted as having personal identifiable information within them. One really important thing that I need to note when I'm talking about passwords is that in previous versions of Exchequer, when you entered your password, it would automatically convert that password to uppercase. So obviously now with these new password settings, Exchequer does recognise the difference between uppercase and lowercase. So when users are first logging in after the upgrade, it's quite important that they enter that password in uppercase, otherwise it's just not going to recognise that password. It's then obviously up to the database administrator to come in here and make whatever changes they need to make in terms of making people's passwords a lot more complex now. So other setup kind of features in 2018R1 include an option for your currency to export your rates. So it's quite useful if you do have a number of different currencies within your utilities and your system setup and your currency setup. You now have the option to export and import rates. It literally just pops up and asks you to browse and give the CSV file a name. You can then amend that spreadsheet if you need to and re-import your rates using the import rates here as well. Also another setup point to note is that if you are already using the GovLink when you submit your VAT returns in Exchequer, the URL is updated to the new HMRC URL for use with Making Tax Digital. Some of you may or may not be aware that as per April next year, the government will require people to submit their VAT returns digitally. So Exchequer does already have the functionality to do that within the GovLink module, which will be covered in another video, but we also will communicate more information to you before April next year. So moving on to stock, there are some changes to the actual stock record itself within this latest version. So firstly, you'll notice when you first open a stock record, normally you'd have a main tab here on the left. It's not actually missing, it's just you need to tab to the left with these arrows here. And the reason for that is that there is an extra tax tab here, just splitting out the information held on the tax and the web tabs, just making room for development in the future really. If you do find that a bit of an annoyance when you're opening the system, having to sort of scroll across to your main tab, then I would just advise resizing your screens a little bit so that all of your tabs fit on there. And you can then right click and save coordinates. What that means is that the next time you open that screen, there's no scrolling. You have that main tab across to the left like you used to seeing before. Also, the other change on your stock record is that now it displays the stock group that this item sits within, so it's quite useful when you're considering what stock item it is and where it might be placed within the tree. And also all 6 lines of your stock description are now displayed to save you having to scroll up and down. There used to be a scroll bar on that right hand side. So that pretty much sums up the changes made in 2018 R1. So I'll just move on and talk about the changes that came in 2017 R1. So the first thing to mention is that within that version you receive full support for Office 64-bit versions when emailing, and that includes support for Office 365. So some of you may have seen some workarounds around applying different switches in the registry to get Exchequer to work with Office 365, but from version 2017 R1 that is now fully supported. Setup wise, a couple of things to note. Firstly, when you go onto your F6 period down here at the bottom, you've got a tick switch for show periods as months, not as numbers, which has always been within the system. If the number of periods you have in the system are more than 12 or less than 12, the show periods as months, not as numbers, doesn't work. The periods don't equate to the months correctly, obviously because it's not running over 12 calendar periods. So what happens with this is that if you do have more or less than 12, it won't allow you to tick that box. And that also applies if you have the user-defined period plugin where the periods are not starting and ending on the calendar dates as well. Within batch payments, there's a useful change where we can now tag based upon the transaction date or the due date. So normally you'd probably be used to coming into here and just tagging or untagging the relevant transactions. What you can now do with under your wild tag is select either transaction date or due date. So you can tag all transactions that are due up to a certain date. Okay, moving back to reports again, there are actually in this version some new standard reports. So across the two versions there is quite a lot of enhancements around the reporting side of things. So within the standard reports, the first thing that they've done is relocate some of the reports to a more logical position within the menu. So for example, customer-based and supplier-based reports used to sit underneath MISC reports, but they now have their own reporting folder. In terms of new standard reports, there's several on here. So the first one's being under credit control. You now have customer and supplier transactions on hold. You then have traders on hold, so within the customer based and supplier based, so that you can see which traders are on hold as a whole. You've got some sales and purchase order reports, so all to do with orders that aren't fully allocated, and orders that are part received and orders that are part picked. So there's some helpful reports there in terms of your sales and purchase order processing. And in terms of 2017 R1, that pretty much covers off the version changes from there as well. So there will be some separate videos that are going to be published around the 2 new GDPR modules, so around the password complexities and around the anonymisation of the fields. But in the meantime, if there is anything that you need, please don't hesitate to contact HBP on the Exchequer Support Help Desk. Thank you for listening.